Having a game of chess in the park sounds like a perfectly safe activity to do in beautiful surroundings, and you'd be absolutely right to think this. That is, unless you're playing chess in Bitsa Park, Russia in the early 2000s. During this period, the locals were terrified to even go into Bitsa Park, especially at night time, because the Bitsa Park Maniac was on the loose, an anonymous serial killer who stalked their victims through the woods before bludgeoning them over the head with a hammer. Once caught, police found the killer's chessboard, which had 61 out of 64 squares numbered, indicating they'd killed 61 victims. So the alias of the Bitsa Park Maniac quickly changed to the Chessboard Killer, and Alexander Pichushkin was on his way to becoming recognized as Russia's new most prolific serial killer. Or so he thought. This is the portrait of Alexander Pichushkin, also known as the Chessboard Killer. Welcome to Portrait of a Serial Killer. Before I start, I want to give you a quick disclaimer. In this episode, I'll be discussing murder, bullying, and alcoholism. I won't go into all the gory details, but it could still be upsetting for some. If that's you, keep yourself safe and click out of the video. Hopefully I'll see you in another one. Alexander Pichushkin was born on the 9th of April 1974 in Moscow, Russia, to mother Natalia Pichushkin. Pichushkin never knew his father, who abandoned the family within months of him being born. Pichushkin grew up in 2 Hesonsky Street in the South Moscow suburbs. He lived on the 5th floor of a block of flats in a 2-bedroom apartment with his mother, stepdad, and younger half-sister, Katya. Pichushkin would sleep on a pull-out couch in the living room as space was limited. This was a low-income area and was considered a bad neighbourhood with poor amenities, high levels of crime, homelessness, and substance misuse. Their apartment building was just a short 6-minute walk from Bitsa Park, where most of the murders occurred. Bitsa Park is a dense woodland of 270 acres, and it's heavily utilised by locals trying to escape the confined spaces of their tiny apartments. Pichushkin's mother describes her son as a friendly child, but maintains that this changed following an incident with a swing. Around age 4, Pichushkin fell backwards off a swing, which then struck him on the forehead as it spun back. As we know from previous episodes, damage to the frontal cortex of the brain is known to produce poor impulse control and difficulties in regulating emotions, often leading to aggression. This would have been especially true for Pichushkin, a child at the time, as his forehead would not have been fully developed, providing only a fraction of protection compared to that of an adult. Natalia reports that her son became frequently impulsive and hostile following this event. The change in her son's behaviour led Natalia to move him from a mainstream school to a school for children with learning difficulties. During his time in mainstream school, Pichushkin was bullied emotionally and physically by more able children. The bullying lessened due to his move to a different school, but the mainstream kids would still torment him if they crossed paths. This abuse made Pichushkin feel powerless and weak, feelings which would often manifest in angry outbursts in the home. Pichushkin's grandfather was unhappy about the change in school, as he'd noticed that while Pichushkin struggled socially, he was intelligent. Not wanting his grandson's talents to be wasted, he took him under his wing and had him move in with him. This way, he could encourage his grandson in more intellectual pursuits outside of school, which seemed to focus more on managing his social difficulties than academic achievements. One of these interests was chess. It was a game in which Pichushkin showed great skill. His grandfather introduced him to competitive games older men were playing in Bitsa Park. Pichushkin found an outlet to channel his anger. He felt in control and competent when playing chess, often dominating the chessboard and winning most of his games. Unfortunately, in 1988, Pichushkin's grandfather died. This was said to have a profound effect on 14-year-old Pichushkin, who had to move back in with his mother. Pichushkin became depressed and began to self-medicate by drinking vodka. He bought a dog that he would regularly walk in Bitsa Park and continue to play chess there. His drinking made him even more at home with the older men there, because they were usually drinking vodka as well. Around this time, Pichushkin had had his fill of being picked on by the neighbourhood kids and began to lift weights to build his physical strength to better defend himself against their attacks. Towards the end of his adolescence, Pichushkin began to bully younger children. He enjoyed taking on the role of bully and having others fear him instead of the other way around. On one occasion, he held a child by their leg, dangling him upside down out of a window and threatening to drop him. This incident and many more were filmed by Pichushkin, who would re-watch them to relive the feelings of power and control. Pichushkin left school and compulsory military service without qualifications and began work at a supermarket as a clerk, a job he would stay in until his arrest. At the age of 18, in July 1992, Pichushkin committed his first murder. His first victim was Mikhail Odachuk, a friend of his from school. The two shared an interest in Russian serial killer Andrei Chikatilo, who had been charged with 53 counts of murder on April the 14th of that year. According to Pichushkin, the two had met in Bitsa Park that day to murder someone because they were curious about how it felt. Mikhail, who had gotten cold feet or perhaps had not taken Pichushkin seriously to begin with, eventually admitted that he didn't want to go ahead with the plan. Pichushkin responded to this news by striking Mikhail over the head 21 times with a hammer he had brought with him. He then dragged his body to a well and threw the body into it. The well was an access shaft that connected to a vast sewage network under Bitsa Park. It was full of high-pressure, freezing cold waters that helped flush the system of waste. If Mikhail had survived being strangled, he would have likely drowned if not been killed by the 30-foot drop to the bottom of the well. We'll never know what killed him for sure, as his body, like many of Pichushkin's victims, was never found. Mikhail's disappearance was investigated, and Pichushkin was brought in for questioning at the police station, as he was the last person seen with Mikhail. The pair had been sighted walking in the direction of Bitsa Park. Pichushkin kept his calm and confirmed that he had been with Miguel at the park, but insisted they parted ways after going for a walk and that Miguel had been okay the last time he had seen him. With no further evidence, Miguel's case went cold and remained unsolved until Pichushkin's arrest 14 years later. It is believed that Pichushkin did not kill again until the 17th of May 2001. His second victim was Yevgen Pronin. Pronin was a friend Pichushkin had met while playing chess at the park, so when Pichushkin asked Pronin to honour the anniversary of his dead dog by accompanying him to the gravesite and having a drink of vodka with him, Pronin thought nothing of it and agreed. The two walked into the woods and Pichushkin led his friend off the trail and towards the well. Once there, Pichushkin announced that they were at the gravesite and produced a bottle of vodka, and the pair took turns taking swigs. Eventually, Pichushkin indicated it was time to return to the trail. As soon as Pronin turned his back, Pichushkin struck him over the head several times with a hammer and then threw his body down the well, just like he had done before with Mikhail. An exhilarated Pichushkin returned home as if nothing had happened. Pronin was the first of 11 victims Pichushkin would murder throughout 2001. All were old men that Pichushkin had either made friends with playing chess, homeless men he had befriended at the park through a shared love of vodka, or they were his neighbours who lived in the same or near apartment buildings. Pichushkin commented that he preferred to kill people he knew because they trusted him and were easier to get on their own. Pichushkin explained to police that he continued to use the dead dog story to get the men to follow him to remote parts of the woods, where he would carry out the same MO of hitting them over the head and throwing their bodies down the well. Pichushkin would continue with his murder spree in this fashion for another 4 years without piquing the interest of the police. Families and friends of the victims would sometimes report their loved ones missing, but the police force at the time was still finding its footing following the end of Soviet rule in 1991. As to be expected, some police officers embraced the new era, while others held on to the ideals of Soviet Russia. There was political tension within the police force, which often resulted in logistical issues. Corruption was common, and police forces felt unequipped to deal with the sheer volume of crime. Police often wouldn't investigate what they deemed unimportant cases because of limited resources. A lot of Pichushkin's victims were old and often homeless men who were not considered important enough to investigate when their loved ones reported them missing. Maria Vericheva, one of Pichushkin's surviving victims, provides an example of how police failed to investigate early on in the case. On February the 23rd, 2002, Pichushkin tried to kill Maria Vericheva, who was pregnant at the time. He bashed her over the head with a hammer and pushed her down the well as usual, but she somehow, after being trapped in the sewage system for over 20 hours, managed to climb out and was taken to the hospital. She had requested that the nurses call the police so she could report her attack. as she knew the attacker was called Alexander Pichushkin and she had spent enough time with him so she could provide a detailed description of what he looked like. Unfortunately, the responding officer became uninterested in the case once he found out Maria didn't have registration papers and was illegally living in Moscow. The officer advised that she'd survived the incident and so there was no serious crime committed, and so if she stayed quiet about her attack, they'd overlook her illegal habitation. Maria agreed to keep quiet, and that was the end of that. Towards the end of 2005, Pichushkin became reckless and began to leave his victims' bodies in open view instead of throwing them down the well. He would often put a vodka bottle or sticks in one of the holes his hammer had left in his victims' skulls, serving as a crude calling card. He wanted people to discover his work, choosing to dump his bodies in busy parts of the park. On October 15th, 2005, police found the body of Nikolai Warogov in the park. He had suffered significant injuries to his head and had a bottle of vodka protruding from his skull. In November, they discovered the body of Nikolai Zakharchenko in the park with a vodka bottle penetrating his skull. He is believed to be Pichushkin's 41st victim. Police found 2 more bodies in the following 3 weeks, both with the same MO. By January 2006, police had found a total of 7 bodies in Bitsa Park, all with severe injuries to the head, with either a bottle or sticks penetrating their skull. At this point, police knew they were dealing with a serial killer because there was such a clear MO. Victims were struck on the head repeatedly with a blunt object, likely a hammer, and one of the holes in the victim's skull would either be filled with a vodka bottle or sticks. The victims were all men, most of whom were socially isolated, with few people noticing they'd gone missing. Unfortunately, they didn't have anything in the way of forensic evidence or eyewitnesses. At this stage, people were not frequenting Bitsa Park. It was too dangerous with what the media called the Bitsa Park Maniac on the loose. At one point, a rumour became popular among locals, which was that the Bitsa Park Maniac was an escaped psychiatric patient from a mental hospital located on the border of the park. This escaped insane patient was now living in the park and hunting victims at night. Police investigated this rumour and questioned staff and many of the hospital patients who were deemed well enough to have day leave, as they would often choose to walk around the park. But police came up with no suspects. There had been no unresolved incidences of escaped patients either, so the police concluded this lead and moved on with their investigation. 200 police officers were put on patrol in Bitsa Park and would regularly question anyone they deemed suspicious. At one point, the police arrested a cross-dresser who was found to have a hammer in their handbag. However, after arresting and questioning him, it became clear that they were not the perpetrator, as they had alibis for many of the killings and a reasonable explanation for why they were carrying the hammer. They feared being attacked in the park because of the maniac, but also because they'd been previously attacked for being a cross-dresser. They were released and the police continued their search. In April 2009, there appeared to be a significant change in the maniac's MO when police discovered the body of a woman, 48-year-old supermarket worker Larissa Kuligina, in Bitsa Park. She had substantial injuries to her head like the previous male victims. At this stage, police were unsure if this was a copycat killing or if the maniac had switched to female victims. But just 2 months later, the body of 36-year-old single mother Maria Moskalovia was found in Bitsa Park with the same MO. She also worked in the same supermarket as Larissa, the same supermarket as Pichushkin, as police would soon find out. Pichushkin had asked Maria to come for a picnic with him in Bitsa Park after the two had finished a shift at the supermarket. Marina had agreed, but explained she needed to leave a note for her son at the apartment so he'd know where she was when he got in. Marina left the note for her son explaining she had gone for a walk with Pichushkin and left his mobile number should he need to speak with her, as her mobile phone wasn't working. Pichushkin knew about the note but still chose to murder Marina once they were in the secluded woods of Bitsa Park. Marina was Pichushkin's last victim. After the news reported that another woman's body had been found in Bitsa Park, Marina's son called his father and explained his concern. He explained that his mum had not come home and that he had called Pichushkin to ask where his mother was, but Pichushkin had said he hadn't seen Marina for 2 months, a blatant lie, as they both worked together, and Marina had left the note stating she was with him. The father contacted the police with this information. Meanwhile, the police had discovered a metro ticket in Marina's coat pocket and had begun the massive task of trolling through CCTV footage of the Moscow metro to see if they could see anyone travelling with Marina on that day. They eventually find Marina in the footage and see she is in the company of a male throughout her journey. Now now they need to find out who this male is. Marina's son ID'd his mother's body and provided the police with a note she had left for him. The police checked the mobile number and found it was registered to 32-year-old Alexander Pichushkin. Police arrest Pichushkin on the 16th of June around 10 p.m. and are confident he is the man on CCTV footage. Pichushkin remained calm and maintained his innocence to begin with. When the police showed him the CCTV footage, the note Marina had left her son, and began to inquire about his whereabouts during the time of the murder and the hours that followed, Pichushkin eventually conceded, admitting to the murder of Marina. But he doesn't stop there. He announces he is the Bitsa Park Maniac. Police had only suspected Pichushkin of 14 murders, as those had been the only victims they had discovered up until this point. So they were shocked when Pichushkin confessed to killing 61 victims, 60 of whom he'd killed in Bitsa Park, and one he had thrown from an apartment building. Police had closed that victim's case as a suicide at the time. This would make him the most prolific serial killer in Russian history, as Chikatilo had killed 53 people, and so police remained skeptical of Pichushkin's claim. Upon searching his apartment, they find his diary, which was filled to the brim with the descriptions and plannings of murder. They also found a chessboard with numbers pasted on most squares, counting upward. When asked about the significance of the chessboard, Pichushkin explained that he wanted to murder for every square on the chessboard, and so far he had killed 61. He had 3 more to go. This is why the press began to call him the chessboard killer. While chilling, this still did not prove Pichushkin's claim, so police began to investigate each one. This involved keeping Pichushkin talking so he could provide as much detail as possible regarding each victim, so they could investigate them to see if they could be verified. Police take Pichushkin to Bitsa Park so he can demonstrate on film exactly how he killed each victim. This would then be used as evidence in court. Over 40 hours of footage was shot over the many visits to the park. Pichushkin shamelessly demonstrated on a life-size dummy how he murdered the victims and what he did with their bodies. On one occasion, Pichushkin led the police to the remains of a body they had not yet discovered. Police now had circumstantial and forensic evidence linking Pichushkin to 16 murders. They still had 45 potential victims to verify. Pichushkin told police that he had thrown approximately 43 people down the sewage wells in Bitsa Park. Marie Vericheva was interviewed again, the pregnant woman who had survived her attack in 2002. She would be able to confirm that it was Pichushkin who attacked her and that he attempted to dispose of her body by throwing her in the sewage well. When police threw a life-size dummy down the well, the pressure alone tore the dummy into pieces. This was terrible news for police, who realised they were unlikely to discover many bodies at all, let alone bodies all in one piece. During the period Pichushkin was actively killing, bodies occasionally had washed out of the sewer system in different places over the years. These bodies were believed to have been accidental deaths or suicides, as the bodies were so banged up from their journey through the high-pressure sewers that they were close to impossible to ID, and nothing suggested to police that foul play had been involved. Unfortunately, the bodies had been disposed of, so evidence linking them to Pichushkin was circumstantial. Psychologists had analysed Pichushkin over 6 months before the trial and deemed him sane. They surmised that he felt powerless in his life and committed murder as a means of feeling powerful. While the motive was not necessarily sexual, the feeling of being so powerful had become arousing to Pichushkin, who had admitted sometimes he would ejaculate while striking a victim over the head. When describing the power he felt over his victims, Pichushkin once stated, "I felt like a father of all of these people. I opened the door to another world for them." On September the 13th, 2007, the trial began. In Russia, the accused are placed in a cage. Some have metal bars and others have glass walls. This ensures that the court can see the accused, but the accused is also contained and protected. During his trial, Pichushkin would pace up and down his glass cage as he provided a detailed confession to each murder. He showed no remorse, nor did he apologise to the victims' families. When asked by the judge if he had any regrets, he responded that he wished he hadn't been caught so soon, because he was planning on killing another woman 2 days after he'd been arrested. After 6 weeks, the trial concludes. After just 3 hours of deliberation, the jury provide their unanimous verdict. On October the 29th, 2007, Pichushkin was found guilty on all counts, which included 49 counts of murder and 3 counts of attempted murder. He is given the harshest sentence in Russia, which is a lifetime sentence, with the first 15 years being served in solitary confinement. Pichushkin asked the judge to charge him with an additional 11 murders, arguing he was guilty of at least 60 murders. This, of course, was declined by the judge. It is speculated that Pichushkin wanted to be caught by police, and this is why he began to take more risks and leave the bodies visible. Sometimes he would stage the victims' bodies, resting them against trees so they could be more easily found. Upon arrest, Pichushkin would happily confess in detail about his killings. Perhaps he wanted the same recognition as his serial killing hero, Andrei Chikatilo. This theory has more weight when you think about how he tried to get the judge to charge him with 11 more murders. At 49, he is 4 behind Chikatilo. I couldn't find out what psychiatrists make of him moving from men to women. I'm thinking he targeted men initially because he felt more able to talk to men, but then, over time, he gained the confidence to speak to women and ask them out. Pichushkin appealed his sentencing, requesting a 25-year sentence instead of life, but this was quickly rejected. Pichushkin resides in a federal government institutional penal colony number 18, also known as Polar Owl, which is way cuter. He should be out of solitary confinement now. 15 years of not speaking and seeing people is intense. That's got to affect your mental health. Anyway, that's all I have for this one. I'll see you in the next one. Polar Owl, what the hell? Thanks for watching. If you got something out of this episode, please consider giving it a like. If you want to see more episodes, make sure you click the subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss anything. But that's it for now. I'll catch you in the next one.